A Canadian judge issued an order to end the bridge blockade, allowing police to arrest protesters. Windsor, Ontario. A judge on Friday ordered protesters at the Ambassador Bridge over the U.S. Canadian border to end the 5-day-old blockade. That has disrupted the flow of goods between the two countries and forced the auto industry on both sides to roll back production. It was not immediately clear when or if law enforcement officers would be sent in to remove the demonstrators, who parked their pickups and other vehicles in a protest against the country's COVID-19 restrictions and an outpouring of fury toward Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government. Chief Justice Geoffrey Morawetz of the Ontario Superior Court said during a virtual hearing that the order would be effective at 7 p.m. to give protesters time to leave. Windsor police immediately warned that demonstrators blocking the streets could be subject to arrest and their vehicles may be seized. The decision came after a 4.5-hour court hearing at which the city of Windsor and lawyers for auto parts makers argued that the blockade was causing undue economic harm for the city and region. Supporters of the protesters, some of them truckers, argued that an order would disrupt their right to peacefully protest vaccine mandates that hinder their ability to earn a living. Since Monday, drivers mostly in pickup trucks have bottled up the bridge connecting Windsor to Detroit. Hundreds more truckers have paralyzed downtown Ottawa over the past 2 weeks. The ruling came in a day of fast-moving developments as federal, provincial, and local officials moved simultaneously on different fronts to try to break the so-called Freedom Convoy standoff. This unlawful activity has to end, and it will end, Trudeau warned just hours earlier. "We heard you. It's time to go home now," the Prime Minister said, cautioning that everything is on the table for ending the blockade. Also Friday, Ontario Premier Doug Ford declared a state of emergency and threatened heavy penalties against those who interfere with the free flow of goods and people. Ford said he will convene the provincial cabinet on Saturday to urgently enact measures that make it crystal clear it is illegal to block critical infrastructure. Violators will face up to a year in prison and a maximum fine of $100,000, he said. There will be consequences for these actions, and they will be severe, Ford said. This is a pivotal moment for our nation. The measures will also provide additional authority to consider taking away the personal and commercial licenses of anyone who doesn't comply, according to the Premier's office. Trudeau called Ontario's decision responsible and necessary and said he spoke with President Joe Biden about it. See also, Biden says it's probably premature for states to drop face mask requirements as Nevada, including its casinos, becomes latest to do so. We discussed the American and indeed global influences on the protest, Trudeau said. We talked about the US-based flooding of the 911 phone lines in Ottawa, the presence of US citizens in the blockade, and the impact of foreign money to fund this illegal activity. Trudeau said that on some fundraising platforms, as much as 50% of the donations are coming from the US. He said he and Biden agreed that for the security of people and the economy, these blockades can't continue. So make no mistake, the border cannot and will not remain closed. Trudeau said he understands the protesters are frustrated by the pandemic, but these blockades are hurting everyday families, auto assembly workers, farmers, truckers, blue-collar Canadians. The protests have caused shortages of auto parts that have forced General Motors, Ford, Toyota, and Honda to close plants or cancel shipments. Before the judge's ruling came down, dozens of protesters in Windsor blocked the entrance to the bridge in what felt like a block party. Demonstrators milled about, carrying signs and Canadian flags, some at the ends of hockey sticks. While music played and food handed out, a trampoline was set up for the children. Troy Holman, a 32-year-old Windsor resident who has protested every day this week, said he believes the government overreached with its COVID-19 restrictions, which he said hurt his wife's small business. "Unfortunately, we have to be here, because this is what's going to get the attention of the government," he said. Signs read, "Freedom is essential, say no to mandatory vaccines and end mandates. We stand for freedom. We believe that it should be everyone's personal decision what they inject into their bodies," said protester Karen Dreger, 40, of Leamington. "We're saying, that's enough. We need to go back to normal and live our lives again." Authorities at various levels of government have hesitated to forcibly remove the protesters around the country, reflecting apparently a lack of manpower by local police, Canada's reverence for free speech, and fears of violence. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens warned earlier this week that some of the truckers are willing to die. But the political pressure to reopen the bridge appeared to be mounting along with the economic toll. The Ambassador Bridge is the busiest U.S. Canadian border crossing, carrying 25% of all trade between the two countries. The standoff comes at a time when the auto industry is already struggling to maintain production in the face of pandemic-induced shortages of computer chips and other supply chain disruption. American legislators are freaking out, and rightfully so, said Nelson Wiseman, a political science professor at the University of Toronto. Pressure is now being exerted by the White House on Trudeau to act more decisively. In addition to maintaining the bumper-to-bumper occupation of Ottawa, protesters have closed 3 border crossings in all: at Windsor, at Coutts, Alberta, opposite Montana, and at Emerson, Manitoba, across from North Dakota. The Freedom Convoy has been promoted and egged on by many Fox News personalities and attracted support on the right, from the likes of former President Donald Trump and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Amid signs that authorities might be prepared to get tough, Police in Windsor and Ottawa awaited reinforcements from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the federal police force. Ottawa's mayor has asked for 1,800 additional police officers, which could nearly double the manpower available to the capital city's police force. The protests have spread outside Canada as well. Demonstrators angry over pandemic restrictions drove toward Paris in scattered convoys of camper vans, cars and trucks Friday in an effort to blockade the French capital, despite a police ban. And in a bulletin to local and state law enforcement officers, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security warned that truck protests may be in the works in the United States. The agency said the protests could begin in Southern California as early as this weekend, and spread to Washington around the State of the Union address in March. While the Canadian protesters are decrying vaccine mandates for truckers and other COVID-19 restrictions, many of the country's infection measures, such as mask rules and vaccine passports for getting into restaurants and theaters, are already falling away as the Omicron surge levels off. Pandemic restrictions have been far stricter in Canada than in the U.S., but Canadians have largely supported them. The vast majority of Canadians are vaccinated, and the COVID-19 death rate is 1/3 that of the United States.